Standing up in McKinney. This is According to Callus. Episode 673. I guess it's a week in review or free for all Friday, whichever we prefer. With that, let's kick it off. Episode 673 is coming to you on the 26th of July, the year of our Lord 2024. And we're finishing strong. The month is almost done. Where has it all gone? All right. Before we get into the meat of the day, we're going to talk a little bit about the Donald, Dems, leaders as punishment, politics and religion. You can't please everybody, and you got to serve somebody. And a special add-on, a response to an article about how the most right-wing appeals court was reined in by the Supreme Court this term. For all that and more, stick with me. Before we get there, let me remind you the best way to continue to grow the show, make a difference, get our voice heard. Independent, conservative, Christian voices, we are being prevented from growing. So that's what you got to do is you like, share, subscribe. Break those algorithms. Join me on your social media of choice. A reminder, I have a page and a group at Facebook. I am a pro at Gab, and I still drop in at MeWe. And for now, you can still find the show, or at least most of them, over at YouTube. Without further ado, let us begin. All right. Trump lives. So, there was an attempt on the former president's life. We covered that a little bit on Monday the 22nd. Keeping in mind that it happened about a week and 4 days earlier. It happened the Saturday before I went on vacation. In fact, I pretty much warned the family, if he dies, we're not going. I did not want to be on the road if they were successfully accomplishing their task at hand. Notwithstanding the very crazy review of the news that came out quickly after it occurred, as if they were trying to hide the fact of what went on, strange as that may seem, you would think that any highly elected official or former elected official or somebody that's known worldwide is nearly murdered, that might be frontline news. And you might want to be at least somewhat honest about how it happened. But apparently not. Now, I know I kind of passed along the joke about the caddy the next day, but I would just say the best thing I've heard over the last 2 weeks now is apparently, somebody flew a plane over New York City, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly what it says. If you're going to shoot at the king, you better make sure you don't miss. And you did miss. Just saying. Now, while we're talking about Trump, we're talking about the fact that he still lives, and we use the reference king, let me be straight up with you. The biggest concern I have with any president is the fact that we have what Brian McClanahan would call the imperial presidency. Every president since I've been alive has had far too much power and authority vested in them. Too much deference. It is astounding to me that we have an elected king and nobody seems to grant that that's a problem. Nobody seems to understand that that was never the plan. Now, maybe the Hamiltonians, especially those in their grave, are happy about this outcome. But I would imagine the vast majority of the first 3 or 4 generations of the country would be turning over in their graves if that was possible over what we've allowed. But that's where we're at. All right. Item number two. That's right. Dems in disarray. Well, if you listen to any of the Republican or conservative talking heads, that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you there's chaos and there's confusion and they have no idea what they're going to do. I mean, they basically soft-cooed Biden out the door, right? Told him he wasn't going to run and they were going to pull his money. Now, whatever concessions he was able to extract, goody for him. I fully expect they're going to 25th Amendment him here before too long. I mean, he's now an albatross around the sitting vice president's neck, who is presumably the front runner to replace him. Now, my understanding is within a month, we're going to have another convention, the DNC, right? The Democrat National Convention. And they're going to come up with who the proposed presidential candidate and their running mate might be. Now, what's ironic to me, as the outgoing resident and the replacement resident all are selling us an idea. They're selling us an idea that they and they alone can save democracy. Well, first of all, democracy is not the form of government we have. And I know that's, kind of a nitpicky thing, but we have a federal republic. And whether it's President Biden or Harris, neither one of them is going to do a darn thing about democracy, saving it, period. End of story. If anything, every president we've had has been whittling away on the representative republic, the federal republic that we've had since I've been born. So spare me. Now, I'm not saying Trump's perfect, but he's going to be significantly better than President Biden. And whatever disarray they may have, it's going to come down to the same battle it always is, right? How progressive can we be and still get away with a win? And then, of course, there's going to be the whole angle of the Clinton family versus the Obama family. And, that's a big yawn. I mean, really? Same old, same old. And I am out on the whole dynasty stuff here. I mean, okay. Two of my favorite elected officials were Ron and Rand Paul, but at least they were in different states and in different bodies, right? It's crazy. But this is the world we live in. People are apparently just wanting a king. Tell me, how does that preserve democracy? How does that defend democracy? Sounds like a bunch of garbage to me. Okay. I think I beat that one. Oh, well, and to be honest, if the Dems are in disarray, which I don't really know that they are, because they're a top-down run organization like all good progressive communist, leftist, socialist organizations are, they have lots of what they would call I won't even say what they call them, but let's just call them their useful people. How about that? They have their useful people. And they don't run anything. And they apparently don't understand that they don't run anything. But that's the world we live in, folks. That's just where we're at. All right. The disarray is the internal continual power structure within the Democrat Party. And let's be honest, the same thing really goes on in the Republican Party. I mean, does anybody really believe or take anything serious that Karl Rove says anymore? I mean, if that guy hasn't been completely discredited by now, I don't know what it's going to take. Yet, he gets trotted out every 2 years about the architect. Whatever. Come on. Any case, all right. Now, I may have brought this up a time or two in the past, but somebody, or actually one of the books I read and then another program I've listened to brought up the idea or reminded me of the idea that sometimes leaders are a form of punishment. What do I mean? Well, you can get evil and or bad leaders. You can get children or people with the mind of children, or, and I hate to say it because I know how people are going to say it, ladies, women, or feminized men perhaps would be maybe another better way to look at it, leaders. And the Bible says that. So whether you like that I mentioned it or not, that's a biblical curse essentially. So I wonder if we're given a choice of President Biden, Harris, and God forbid she wins or whoever her replacement or second is that not a form of punishment? I mean, realistically, could we not argue that President Biden is acted like a child? He's certainly a criminal. I mean, if that's not a form of punishment, I don't know what is. And setting aside whatever, apologize. Had an interruption there. Gotta deal with things. But the whole idea that bad leaders are a form of punishment is just a very intriguing thought. Now, I mean, even left of center people probably ought to think about that. I mean, these are the people running around equating Trump with Hitler. I mean, if they think Hitler was a bad leader, I mean, just stands to reason that they at least take the idea that bad leaders are bad and shouldn't be there. They just have a kind of a warped conception of what a bad leader is, right? I mean, I've been having lots of fun with the audio here tonight, folks, but if you can at least accept that sometimes bad leaders are a form of judgment, that's something we need to wrap our heads around. I mean, look at Texas. Or if you take umbrage with that, I mean, look at the state of Wisconsin. Talk about a bad governor. Or Whitmer in Michigan. I mean, got to think, what kind of bad stuff has been going on in Michigan and in Wisconsin that they get two really bad governors? I mean, California, we can at least understand why they would get Newsom, but all right, but seriously, okay. So let's pivot over to the next item here, which is going to be politics and religion. Now, quite a few years ago, there used to be a show. I think it was put out by the End Times Ministry. I don't remember who the guy was. They actually still have a building over on, I think it's 635 over in Garland. Politics and religion, right? And they talk about how those are the two things that we've always been told that you don't talk about in polite company. And as a result, again, pretty much coming from their tagline here, is we're not capable of talking about either of those anymore. And I think that's a fair statement. So, I mean, I talk about politics all the time, probably more than my family would prefer. I have been very disciplined within the last, 8 years or whatever, that I wait for somebody else to bring it up, and I don't lose sleep over the idea that somebody that's not a family member or that's not a close friend has got some wackadoo ideas. I don't lose sleep over that. I just don't. It's not worth even addressing most of the time. Now, I will admit I do get really disappointed with longtime friends or extended family or whatever else that they come up with some kind of wackadoo idea, and it's like, where in the world did that come up from? Especially when they know me and they haven't talked to me. I am, if I do say so myself, a fount of information. Certainly a reference, right? And that's fine. I don't take offense that they didn't talk to me per se, but it just seems if you're going to give me a bad explanation or a poor understanding of something, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to bring it up to me. I mean, again, not that I'm always right, not that I know everything, but it's pretty well known amongst my friends and family that this is kind of my thing. This is what I know. And I'm always open and fair and even-handed and having a discussion. But now the religion thing here, now that's a little tougher. Because I'll say, I'm pretty well read on Christian stuff, I guess. I gotta be honest. Some of my theology stuff is weak. Some of the stuff is pretty darn solid. And I'm kind of changing some theological stances that I've had for a long, long time, and mostly just because I didn't really ever question them when I was younger. Now, nothing crazy, nothing radical, not throwing out the Trinity, not throwing out, substitutional atonement or any of that, major stuff. I think the eschatology thing, that's kind of been a bit of a hang-up. I certainly came from a early childhood of what I would call a hard complementarianism. Then I went into very much a soft complementarianism. And I think my current church and certainly the world around me is very much pushing for egalitarianism. My wife and I are both soft complementarians, but I think I might actually be drifting a little towards a harder version of that. Not entirely, but if for no other reason to have a more defined thing. Now, the interesting thing about that complementarian thing is that's really only for church stuff, right? I mean, there are people out there that will extreme it out. I mean, I don't personally think it's a good idea or ideal, period, that we have lady cops or lady soldiers or lady sailors or lady airmen or, quite frankly, a lot of those things. I just don't think it's a good idea. But I'm also smart enough and perhaps mature enough to understand that there's always the exception to the rule. There's always, things that are outside of the norm, right? And quite frankly, the whole rest of the world doesn't agree with me, whether that's the biblical principle or not. So for me to get upset about that or be put off by that or to, fight over it is just foolish. I mean, I once, and I know I've talked about this before, so I'll be quick about it, but I once had a conversation where I told most of my wife's family, knowing full well that her cousin and his wife were there and they both served in the Navy just like I did. And I said, yeah, I don't think women belong on warships. I just said it flat out. And I got a few raised eyebrows and a few, but the fact of the matter is, and I will speak on this from personal experience, whether it's bad behavior on the female side or bad behavior on the male side, and it's both, women on warships, just not a good mix. It's just not. And I know we want to believe that we're past that and, whatever, but we're not. We're humans. It's just not a good mix. I could tell you all sorts of stories, most of them inappropriate, about why I'm aware of this, but I'm just going to leave you with this. Whatever benefit you get for having ladies serve on warships has a corresponding consequence and cost. So at the end of the day, it is my opinion that there is a net loss on that transaction. And if we do a spread load over the entirety of the U.S. Navy of that, we're not any better off. Just saying. And I would even go so far as to extend that to effeminate males. Now, maybe that's an unpopular opinion. Maybe that's not nice. Maybe that's not fully libertarian of me or whatever. That's fine. But I'm just telling you about my personal preference. There's no force of law here. And I'm not even sure that I would necessarily advocate for force of law. I'm just talking about where I'm coming from. But again, that's informed by my religious beliefs, right? That's informed primarily from my Christianity. So the challenge is, how do you have a conversation with people that's not a Christian, or a person that's not a Christian, or somebody that believes a different, we'll call it a version of Christianity, progressive Christianity, or perhaps they're just, I don't know, maybe they're Methodists. I mean, how are you going to have a conversation where you're talking about apples to apples and not apples to oranges? I mean, the Orthodox Church, by and large, doesn't put up with any of this nonsense. The Catholic Church, by and large, recognizes roles, and it's only the Protestant Church that we can't get this figured out. And we're just talking about ecclesiastical stuff here. We're not even talking about the greater cultural significance of this. If we can't get our simple stuff straight, how are we going to possibly reach the whole world? I get it. Most churches, especially evangelical churches, are targeted on keeping middle-class white women happy. I mean, to say anything else, you're not paying attention. Does that mean they're always wrong? No. Does that mean that they don't have valid points? Of course not. Does that mean that, we shouldn't at least acknowledge that there are the exceptions to the rule? Sure. Absolutely. But when you're making a generalized rule based upon an exception to the rule, you're clearly ignoring the rule in the first place. I fail to see the wisdom and putting our daughters in the military. I know it happens. I know there's the exception to the rule. That's just not my preference. But I'll tell you what, if one of my daughters would come home and tell me, Dad, I'm going to go join the Air Force, I'd roll my eyes because it's the Air Force. But I'd say, but why? And if they told me what they were going to do, okay. I mean, I don't think that's a wise idea. I don't think that biblically aligns with what we ought to be doing. But ultimately, you're an adult. That's your choice. I would be disappointed in it, but I would respect it. And that's how you can have a conversation that's both politics and religion and not ruin it. Now, I will say that, while I don't believe women belong on warships, I would be a darn fool to say that women shouldn't be in the Navy, because there are a whole lot of nurses that are ladies. There's a whole lot of other roles that are honestly better performed by ladies. So there's more than one way to look at this, and it is a bit more nuanced than a lot of people give it credit for. But that's the world we live in, and there's a conflict between our general politics and our religion, or our Christianity, and you've got to figure out a way to do it. But in my world, Christianity is supposed to be first and foremost, and it's supposed to inform your politics, not the reverse. But I understand that my world is not yours, and is, quite frankly, not the rest of the world's. I don't lose any sleep over that. It's okay. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to accept that your disagreement means I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm going to cave and, give you what you want. It just means that I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. And we're going to have to learn to agree to disagree. It's not that hard, gentlemen and ladies. Okay, next item. I've kind of gone a little too long on that. You can't please everyone. See, I think that's the problem the Republican Party's now put itself into. I believe in the big tent, but at a certain point, that tent becomes giant and doesn't exclude anybody or anything. And we ought to be really careful about how we're going to do that. And if you saw what went on at the RNC, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, am I willing to toss people out and get upset about it? No, but I got to say it's concerning. It is concerning. And yeah, I understand sometimes you got to compromise on policy or preference, but you don't toss out principles. But I honestly think they probably tossed out some principles here that was not a wise choice. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But hey, I don't run the RNC. And I talked about this at length the other day, so we're just going to kind of leave that one alone. The corollary to that is you got to serve someone, right? Some boomer rock star said that at some point. And he's not wrong. Ultimately, we're all serving somebody. I'm not sure who the RNC thinks they're serving. I'm pretty certain I know who the DNC is serving. There's a whole lot of, people that are in our day-to-day life that are really just serving themselves. I mean, look, I will be honest with you. I really struggle to keep my personality and my passions in check on certain things. I have to remember that I don't get to just do whatever I want to do. Now, those preferences and passions are really rare in today's day and age because I'm older, mature, and whatever else. But when I was a 20-year-old, there were many, many times where I got dorked up. We're not going to do this. This is not right. Reality sets in. No, I know who I'm serving. I know ultimately who I answer to. This stuff's out of my control, and it's quite frankly not my responsibility. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I'm just going to do my thing, serve my God, and move on. And to be clear, that also included serve my wife, serve my children, serve my extended family, lead them well, right? That's part of being a leader. You've got to lead your family first before you can lead somebody else. And look, we all fail. We all make mistakes. We all come up short. That's part of being human. So just be real careful on how hard you beat yourself up. Okay, last item, final item here. The most right-wing appeals court was reined in by the Supreme Court this term. Yes, this is by Maureen Groppe or Groppe or whatever over at USA Today. I read it, and in this year's blockbuster Supreme Court term, there was a notable loser. I mean, who writes like this? The conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court would only be pushed so far. The Louisiana court that has become the national testing ground for conservative causes. So I guess the corollary is every other circuit court is a leftist court, or is perhaps the testing ground for the leftist court? Because we certainly know the Ninth Circus Court is. I mean, who writes this nonsense? I mean, it's sad. And what's interesting is the High Court threw out a conservative challenge to social media content moderation. Yeah, because there's a clear violation there. You can be a publisher or a platform. But when you're a platform and you act like a publisher, you have different rules. But apparently that's too difficult for the reporter to grasp. In the 6-3 conservative majority, well, I will tell you, quite frankly, I believe there are probably 4 conservatives, 2 right of center folks, and it may be 3 actual conservatives and 3 right of center folks, and then 3 crazy lefties. I mean, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Kenji Brown. I mean, I'm sorry, but they make Ruth Bader Ginsburg look like a genius at this point. I mean, I would like to have some more Antonin Scalia's, but fortunately, we have Neil Gorsuch, the stalwart of Clarence Thomas. We still have the other 2. Roberts, mediocre. And the other lady, who's also mediocre, even though everybody was excited about her. And then, oh, shoot, I can't think of it. Sorry, folks. Mine just went blank. I used to be able to rattle off all the members of the Supreme Court off the top of my head without even thinking about it. Let's see here. Alito. Yeah. Samuel Alito. Not to be confused with Antonin Scalia, which I have done in the past, by the way. But again, the Center for American Progress said the fact the Supreme Court didn't accept the Fifth Circuit's court most extreme positions shouldn't detract from the fact that the High Court is the most conservative it's been in decades. Yeah, well, it's been crazy leftist for decades. That's why it seems so conservative. The court is going to look more legitimate. It's going to look more moderate if they're tamping down on the Fifth Circuit. What? I mean, this is sad. This is sad. Now, look, I know different people feel different things about different court cases and political issues. I get it. But if you can't just write a quasi-objective article here, I mean, I think this is called the polemic. But it's sad. It is. Oh, and then Amy Barrett, the justice to watch. Yeah. How about disappointing? Man. Most of this goes directly to the idea of federalism, right? Clarence Thomas and Gorsuch seem to be wanting to go in and say, look, there's a lot of Fed law or Fed rules here that shouldn't even have in existence. This stuff is states' issues. And just because they're remanding it as to the state and saying that it's state, it's not that they're saying necessarily that they feel one way or the other about a specific issue, though I guess with the current court, they probably are, only because the previous courts have been just so far left before, probably since the mid-'80s or whatever, they've been more center. But certainly in the 60s and 70s, they were wackadoo left in many, many cases, because that's where all the leftist nonsense comes from in the courts. Well, you know what? This is fine, and I get it. But please, let me get her name right, or at least Maureen Groppe or Groppe, please take a few minutes and learn how to write an objective news article again. Please. Pretty please. With that, this has been According to Callus. And I guess for tonight, I'm going to give you 2 ads to see you off to the sunset. And with that, I will see you on the other side.
For all your Texas fashion tees, it's TexianPride.com. Whether you're out honky-tonkin' in Austin, bucking Broncos in Fort Worth, or strolling the San Antonio Riverwalk, Texian Pride is here for you. Support a Texan-owned business and show off your love for Texas with style. Visit TexianPride.com for your next fashionable Texas tee. TexianPride.com is the destination for Texans who want to show off their love for Texas. We don't settle for mediocre. Our shirts are made from 100% high-quality athletic cotton. They're cool, comfortable, and designed to fit and flatter any body type. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit TexianPride.com for your next stylish Texas tee.